Good afternoon. I guess a little bit of good evening. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. Justin Cloud here, the executive director of the Cloud Family Foundation, looking to do our next CFF live stream tonight. Got a good one for you. Really looking forward to the engagement that we're going to have tonight. We're going to have a fun one. One of my dear friends, he happens to be the Distinguished Engineer of the Year, Mr. Neville Maycock, and we're going to bring him on in a little bit. We're going to have a really good discussion. He was a distinguished engineer for 2020. I'm sure it might be 2021, 2022, how good the brother is. But we're going to bring him on in a few minutes, have a real good conversation about his career, some of his takeaways, how he can kind of provide some of the things he's done so that way people out there can take that information and then essentially apply it to their own environment. So we're going to bring him on in a little bit. But first, before we do that, I want to make sure that I talk about the Cloud Family Foundation. Again, we this past year we did three $1,000 scholarships. Really excited about that. We gave one student to Southern, one to Tuskegee, and one for UCF, which actually is in my backyard here. So we're really looking forward to 2021 and 2022 doing more work. This year also, we're going to be doing laptop donations. While I don't want people to try to donate the laptop to the foundation, we're going to be taking in funding, make sure that we can buy some laptops for the schools, really targeting elementary school, some high schools as well. But there is definitely, if you remember one of the prior CFF live streams, we talked about the digital divide, and one of the big things was making sure individuals had access to technology. So really excited about that. I'm going to drop in the chat as always looking to make sure that we get donations. They're all tax deductible. But make sure you go ahead and look at not only the ability to see the tax donations, but also the live streams from past, right? We did really good in some of the prior live streams that we've done. If you go onto the screen, you can see it right there. In the top right, there is a donate button. Go ahead and click that. Once you do that, there's a couple of options for you. You can go ahead, you can donate directly to the Laptop Foundation. You could donate to some of our scholarship and grant programs. So I'm going to stick that in the chat as well, but at least wanted people to see that there are options that you can do for your donations. And again, that's all tax deductible. So, towards the end of the year, I'm going to be sending out some pretty decent request to people because I know they're going to be doing donations, especially for the end of year. So I'll be looking for people around the November time, around the Christmas time to ante up to make sure that they are donating across the board. So without further ado, I want to bring in the 2020 NSBE Distinguished Engineer of the Year and dear friend of mine, Mr. Neville Maycock. Hey Neville, how's it going?
Going well, sir. How are things with you?
I'm good. I'm gonna hype you up. I'm always a big Neville fan. I'll be talking about you wherever I can. I'm like, yeah, you should Neville's this man. Not only is he killing it as a director of engineering over at Northrop, but the fact that he won. I don't know how many people was nominated. I wish I knew that number so that way I could say of the 20, 30 people that were nominated, Neville won. Distinguished Engineer of the Year. But thank you for coming out tonight. Like I told you when we did the in brief yesterday, I was like, when I first thought about doing this, you were the first name I thought about. So I can't claim that to anybody else, but you were the first person that I wanted to be a guest on the CFF Live. So I appreciate you doing that.
I appreciate the work that you're doing with the foundation.
And so let's kind of jump right into it. Everybody that's out there, you're welcome to ask questions. You can post those comments in the questions in the comment bar. We'll ask them as we go along. If you want to wait to the end, you're welcome to do that. But if you do have questions, feel free to ask them at any point in time, and I will bring them up as we go along. So Neville, can you kind of give us a little bit about your background? We know we'll talk about what the career, how you got there, but let's just start off with a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I was born out in Queens, New York, a long time ago. Lived out there for about 14, 15 years. Went to got through my sophomore year of high school there. My parents decided to retire and move down to Melbourne. Um, Went down with them. Thought, I was coming down to the land of sun and, MTV Spring Break and all that good stuff. And then I realized Melbourne was a much slower town, at least back in the '90s, than what I saw on TV. So got through my last 2 years of high school. I went to college. Literally one block down from my high school over at Florida Tech. Studied electrical engineering there. Got my bachelor's and master's degrees there. About 8, 9 years later, got my MBA at Nova Southeastern. I've been in the aerospace industry about 21 years, and I do tons of work within the community. And as far as the NSBE love, part of the professionals chapters, both in Central Florida and the Chicago professionals chapter.
And it's funny because I was trying to think back. I was like, when did I first meet Neville? And it was a Nesby meet. It was UCF. I mean the Central Florida Nesby. Because I'm thinking I was like I've seen him all over the place, but where in God's name did I meet Neville? And as soon as you said it right there, I was like, yes, it was a CFP meeting. So I it just dawned on me now. I didn't know that you were an adjunct professor too, right? So how did you come about that? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the career itself, but like I said, how did you? What was something that kind of caused that?
At the time, when I got the call, I was pursuing my PhD. So one of the things I wanted to do was teach at
Mhm.
a university. So I was like, okay, let me, test the waters before I, dive in full time. And I had put an application over at Brevard Community College, which is now Eastern Florida State College. And maybe a week or so before the semester, they had an opening. They said, "Hey, can you come in and teach this electronics class?" And I said, "Hey, sure, I'd love to do it. Get to fulfill a portion of my dream."
Mhm.
So that was probably the most fun I've had in a classroom. It's much better being the teacher than the student, definitely.
And it's interesting that you say that, right? So it sounded like it was just an opportunity that kind of been on the bucket list. Are you going to at some point return to that? Is that the goal maybe down the line?
So I guess my parents and a few folks at work are pushing me to finish out my PhD. So at some point, I will do that, and it's probably more of my post corporate career, moving
Mm.
into academia.
And so let's just jump right into it. And that I think that begs a really good question, right? So when we talk about career progression, is it on the job training? Is it some level of advanced degrees? What are some of the things that you recommend for individuals that might be trying to get ahead and learn? Is it I think there may be some combination or two, but do you have a specific thought on what's more important, the formal training or more of the on the job?
I say it's a combination of both. The
Mhm.
formal training piece, one of the thing I tell, at least when I go over to high schools, is, hey, go to college, straight out of high school into college if that's what you want to do, and just keep on going to school until you're done. Like you don't want to get any more degrees, and then at that point, you don't have to worry about doing it later on in life because it's much harder to go back to school later in life when you have family obligations, work obligations. Some of my friends who are going back to school now, I admire them because it's a ton of hard work to try to balance all those priorities and still do well in school. And then the on the
Feel
job.
responsible for having to maybe have that conversation for the first
And then sorry about that.
No
So
worries.
then also the on the job training piece, that's also critical. um, we we underappreciate the value of that. A lot of that
Mhm.
training can also set you up for something later on in life. So it's a combination of both.
And do you feel like that there was there was something in your, let's call it the on-the-job training piece. Was there something that you, in maybe in the early portion of your career, that said, this is what I want to do, or maybe it was, this is what I don't want to do, right? Was there something in that career progression that helped stick out for you that said, these are the tracks that I want to go on?
I'd say at the beginning of my career, I really didn't have anything planned of what I wanted to do. It was
Mhm.
just, hey, I just, being a design engineer, just cranking out designs. I was, pretty happy on doing that. And then I realized, hey, I could do a lot more than what I'm doing right now. So I went and started pursuing. Hey, can I do business development? Can I do program management? Can I do systems engineering? And it's kind of to the previous answer. Try to go and get as much training as I can. So when the opportunity presented itself, I was ready to go and be ready to do that job.
And that's, you make a good point, right? In engineering, right? And I don't know what our makeup of the people that are on the phone right now, but you went from engineering to the program side, right? And so how how did you determine that it was best to kind of broaden your horizon to determine to say, I'm not just going to stick with the engineering? What kind of drove you to think a little bit about outside of just engineering in general?
It's more opportunity. I just wanted to maximize my ability, and I knew I could design. I was very good at it. I just knew that I wanted to be out in front of the customer more, and program management was that avenue to go to. That was an easier transition. And then actually, in my first job over at Harris, one of my friends was leaving the company, and he said, "Hey, I got this project. Would you like to run it?" So I said, "Hey, yeah, I'll jump on that. It's an opportunity that normally I wouldn't get the chance to do." Did
Mhm.
that job, did it very well, and then that opened up the opportunity to do more stuff in the future.
So, but that's the how did you get those skills, right? Because going from engineering, and I'll be quite honest with you, I'm kind of going through that myself, right? I've been engineer for 20 years, right? I've done just about everything under the engineering sun, but now I'm on the program management side. Well, how did you get some of those skills going from engineering to program management? I'm even asking for myself for now, right?
Yeah, so one of the things I did was there's the Defense Acquisition University. They have free courses that you can take online, and I took those courses and stuff in earned value management, in negotiations, and built up those skills. So, and it was free. I didn't have to sit in a college class. I didn't have to have the pressure of trying to perform in the school environment. So it
Right.
was a lot less pressure, and I could learn at my own pace.
That's interesting. I don't even know that I knew about that personally, right? So again, I'm kind of making that engineering to program management transition myself, right? I somehow convinced my current boss, project engineering, if you squinted it really enough, it kind of looks like program management. And apparently that I don't know if she's on the call. She actually might be, but hopefully not only did that work, it kind of helped that transition a little bit. Was there was there one transition for you that was a little bit more difficult, right? And I know you've had a number of jobs, I don't want to say number of careers, but has there been one point where the transition was a little bit more difficult? How did you kind of get through that point?
Oh man, I say the hardest transition was going from a program manager to a director. So
Mhm.
when I found out that I got the job in Chicago to become the director of hardware engineering, that was probably the 10 most restless days of my life. I was actually out on a business trip doing contract negotiations when I got the call. And I honestly, I didn't think I was going to get the job. And it was funny, the manager asked me, hey, did you think you weren't going to get the job? I was like, hell yeah, I had no idea. So then I had to make the determination, hey, do I leave everything that I've established here in Melbourne to go out to Chicago to the unknown, different sector of the company, didn't know too many people out there. And, I went to talk to one of my mentors who was a chief engineer on the program that I was managing. And we had a couple of discussions about it. And he told me, hey, you know, go for it. You never know if you'll get this chance again. So I was like, okay, got it. So when I got to Chicago, the thing I had to worry about, to give you some background, I had to manage about 400 people at 7 different Northrop sites, and we're talking everywhere from Chicago to Buffalo, Ohio, and even Florida. And they all had different cultures. So trying to adjust my style to meet the culture of that site, that was very difficult. It's not anything I had to experience before. And I'll be frank, I mean, in some cases, I didn't do that great of a job, but it was like a lessons learned that I took from that position. And now the things I didn't do too great, I made sure that I do that stuff better in my current role. So um, I can't say like everything I was a success at everything in my career. I mean, there's some times that I didn't do too well, I failed, but I learned from it and moved on from it.
And I want to kind of go back to 2 points you made, right? And one was about moving, right?
Mhm.
I sometimes hear that you have to be open to relocation for growth. I
Mhm.
want to touch on that, and then I'll also want to touch on the fact that um, you kind of implied, yeah, there's going to be some difficulty in learning in that. I want to talk about just be willingness to be open and accept feedback, right? So if you can touch on a little bit about the moving itself, right? And then we'll kind of go back to that being receptive to feedback, because I think both of those are two critical points.
Okay, let me take it from a little different spin. So as far as the moving piece, I had many discussions with my peers in the African American resource group at Northrop Grumman, and they were a little bit disappointed about the number of African Americans in higher level positions. And I went and told them, because at least the people on the call, I was the person in the highest level position. I said, hey, sometimes the opportunities are not going to happen at the time that you want them to happen in the place that you want them to happen. And sometimes you have to move to make that. Um, if you want that advancement, sometimes you have to make the move to make that happen. So when I went to Chicago, I talked about, the transition was hard, but I was like, okay, now this is the opportunity. And if I play my cards right, and if I want to come back to Melbourne, I could potentially do so. And, going back to my mentor, he kind of confirmed that. So, going out to Chicago, I mean, honestly, that was the best move I ever made in my career. Love to have stayed out there longer, but my parents were going through some medical issues. So it kind of drove the need for me to uh, get back to a position that was a little bit closer to home. So it was great working for a company that I can have that flexibility in the opportunities that are available. But if I didn't perform in my role in Chicago, I wouldn't have been able to get back to Florida. So when I went back, and told those folks like, hey, this is my kind of like my path back here. You also have to realize, the path is not going to be straight, especially in at one site. At some point, unless you're very lucky, you're going to have to move for that advancement. And then at some point, you can always come back home.
And I appreciate that. And did you feel like you had to apply for that job? And I know I'm kind of going a little bit off here, but you pointed something out, and I was going to touch on that a little bit. But did you feel a certain level of, I need to go do this, not only because of what it represents, but because I don't want to, it may not come back around. So was there some level of an obligation that you felt like you should have done that, even though you might have had some hesitation initially?
Yeah. I feel even though I was one of the highest, I guess, ranked African Americans at the site, I felt that I needed to do more for myself, just to stretch myself to see if I can succeed in this new role. So I was almost, like, at least for myself, felt obligated to do it. And then once I got into the role, I had the power to make change happen. It's like my obligation to do my job well, because it's not just for myself, but a lot of people I know, because they've told me they look up to me, and they see the inspiration for them to do better because I've made it. And going and when I tell them, hey, the road that I took to get here wasn't one that was very smooth. They really can appreciate the struggle, and then the triumph afterwards. So I feel like it's on my shoulders to perform. So the next, African American, the next woman, the next minority gets the shot in those positions.
And that's perfectly put, right? I mean, one of the things that I think about, and I've actually coached a couple of people, is, when opportunities are presenting themselves, there's what it's representing as you saying no, right? And then what is it representing as the masses of you saying no, right? And I think there's a little bit of, obviously there's a little difference there, but I don't want people to miss out on opportunities because they think they're not right for the job, or it's not perfect timing for the job, um, because of their skill set. Now, I'm going to get back into that a little bit with the imposter syndrome. We do have a question regarding that. But I try to coach them to if somebody asked you to do it, they saw something in you that maybe you don't see in yourself. Go do the job, go figure it out, as opposed to saying no from the beginning. So it looked like you were going to make a comment. So I'll kind of
Yeah.
defer to you.
So you're never going to the job is not going to come to you being ready when the time you want it to come ready. You just have to prepare yourself to make sure you're ready when the opportunity comes. That's what I was going to touch on with that.
And I think that's perfect, right? Because there's a question from in the comments talking about the imposter syndrome, right? And people may not be as familiar with that. It's really that feeling of self doubt and trying to really kind of be a little bit different to kind of get ahead, right? And so did you have any feelings of that? I know at times I've kind of had that feelings. I don't know that I let them come to the surface, but did you have some of those feelings yourself, and how did you kind of accommodate that?
I had imposter syndrome from day one. When I went to my first job, I was wondering, hey, can I make it? Am I going to be successful? Did I pick the right career? And I mean, when I went through the interview process, actually for my first job, even one of the admins, had me questioning myself, because that admin, pretty much said, "Hey, I don't think you're gonna get this job." And I was questioning myself, like, Why would you say something like that?" And then, like, that doesn't make sense. So pretty much I had that chip on my shoulder, and I was like, okay, well, I'm I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I succeed at this job. And I'll tell people, I mean, it's as I went along through my career, um, there were times where I doubted myself, but when I really started to thrive was when I just didn't. I took the fear out of the equation and just said, "Hey, go with it. You're playing with house money. Go and do what you can. If you fail, and let's say the company lets you go, I mean, the job market for engineers is very hot right now. I can go pick myself up, go to another company and succeed. So if that's my mindset, just go for it. You never know what's going to happen if you go take that chance.
Yeah, I completely agree, right? I believe in failing up, right? And I think there was a book, recall, the title "Fail Up," right? I can't remember who was the author of that, but you're right, right? For me personally, I almost feel like I've got to go, right? I've got to give it a shot. And you touched on the ERGs, right? I lead the ERG over at L3 Harris. I feel like even at times where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm kind of like, okay, if not me, who, right? If not now, when? So I totally understand. And, I felt like there was some level of a weight that I had to, and I don't know that I was willing to accept that I couldn't do it. Scared the crap out of me in some instances, but still, I wasn't going to assume that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And mentors, right? We kind of talked about that a little bit, right? You kind of talked how you kept going back to your mentors. Did you have one mentor? Did you have a handful of mentors? Did you have mentors at different levels? And we've talked about some of mentoring in kind of different CFF live sessions. I want to get a little bit of your take on it and how it's kind of worked out for you.
Yeah, so I have multiple mentors. I'm in different areas. So I have like one in engineering, one program management, one with the logistics background, and then I have people just totally outside of like the engineering function. I have a person that I go to more for advice, more mental health type things, things to de-stress myself because my job is inherently stressful. And from those mentoring sessions, I learn a lot because it's just a different person's perspective. I can take myself out of the equation. And see how other people, if they put themselves in that situation, how um, they would react, and that's great for at least understanding a different point of view. And then I mentor a ton of folks, and I learn probably more from mentoring others than I do from the people who mentor me. Most because, I mean, a lot of them are younger. They have different experiences, both from a um, job standpoint and an environment standpoint, and they just bring a whole new perspective to things. And I take those nuggets I get from those people and write them down and utilize those when I'm having to deal with people in other situations, mostly like difficult situations. I can look at, hey, maybe this is another side of things that I'm not really aware of.
Mhm.
It helps a lot with the relationship aspect, because in the end, when you're a leader, at least at the director level, you're dealing a lot more with personalities than you're doing with engineering, right? So um, the psychology piece is very important to me.
I agree. I'm just going to say I 100% agree. And yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you're really dependent on others, right? And that's what your job is at this point in time, is getting people marching in the right direction, getting the best out of them. So, but from also from a mentoring standpoint, I appreciate that you pay it forward, right? You're trying to help the next generation, or maybe not even the next generation, but people who are looking to guidance for you for guidance. So that's really important. Did you feel like that you had to seek out the mentors? And I don't know if I caught that really clearly. If you had to go find, or were there times where mentors were like, "Hey, I see your growth trajectory. I want to come mentor you." And I will tell you, I personally had one man who came and said I remember I was still at Lockheed at the time, and I was walking down the hallway, and he was like, "So who's your mentor?" I was like, "Well, I don't have one yet." He was like, "You do now, right?" And God rest his soul, he passed maybe about 2, 3 months ago, but I do recall him stopping me in the hallway and was like, "Guess who's your mentor now?" I was like, "Okay, all right, let's do it." But I just wanted to see if you had some of that kind of experience as well.
Yeah, my experience with mentors is they kind of reached out to me and they saw
Mhm.
my potential, and they pretty much gave me the guidance that I needed and said, hey, feel free to stop by my office anytime. And when they actually came through with that, and I stopped by the office at very weird times, and they were willing to sit there and talk with me, I knew that they were an ally of mine. So you know I put them into like my inner circle of folks that I go to when I have questions on how to move forward on an issue.
And so you said ally, right? So I'm gonna assume that not every mentor you had looked like you, right? And so I want to make sure I touch on that, because when we think about mentoring, and I've had to tell some people, I was like, not every mentor you should have looks like you and has the same background as you. So I'm gonna pull that thread just a little bit there because I caught that one.
Yeah, no, a lot of my mentors don't look like me. I say the majority of them don't look like me. And it wasn't like I go out and try to seek out people necessarily of skin color. It's, hey, are you pro Neville or not pro Neville? Right. And if you're pro me, then you could be, part of the team. But I'm also, I mean, as far as mentoring goes, I also want to know like when I'm doing bad. So I mean, if you're, I would say like, not pro Neville, but um, I just want to hear the truth. And if I'm not doing something right, or I could go about it a different way to get a different result that would have been more positive. I want to hear that because I need to grow as a person, need to grow as a leader, and the only way you get that is with that critical responses that you get from people.
Yeah, and we talked about kind of briefly touched on that, but that feedback, that honest and open feedback, so that way, if there are things you're doing wrong, you can course correct, right? And I'll ask that kind of question in a different perspective. I at least wanted to address a question that came from YouTube, the YouTube channel as well. When did you realize that mentoring others and community engagement were important values for you? Because that sounds that it's clear that you have identified those as important things. Maybe it wasn't you just woke up and had that aha moment. So I just want to, at least ask the question of, was there a moment in time where you felt like I have to do more, or was it kind of just there?
I think that was like instilled to me from when I was a kid.
Mhm.
When like I was in grade school, I was probably the smartest kid in math when I was growing up, and I would get invited to various things, and I never understood why, but I just happened to be at those events, and I would do my thing, and um, didn't think anything of it. When I got a little bit older, I realized, hey, somebody thought enough of me to put me in that particular situation. um, Once I get into a similar situation, I need to do that. And then I say another person who kind of cemented that with me was my high school baseball coach. His big thing, besides like the hustle, communicate, move your feet stuff for baseball, was to give back to the community. Be grateful for what you have, and that stuck with me. Since then, and he's probably one of my um, mentors that I go to a lot, and I and ironically today, I'm a assistant coach under him, so we've had a relationship now for wow, close to like 20, 25 years, and I just learned a ton from the guy, and that kind of taught me, hey, it everything in life is a little bit bigger than me.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people who aren't as fortunate as you. They don't have the same opportunities. If you can go help them out, build, be that bridge to get them from where they would like to go, you can, they can blossom and do really big things. And nothing is more enjoyable for me than to see other people succeed. I get more joy out of that than watching myself self succeed at this point.
I was like, you took my thunder, because I was about to say, is that why you're a baseball coach? I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lie, that was going to be my next statement. So you took a little bit of my thunder, but I appreciate you anticipating my next question, as a good director should do anyway. So, but we talked a little bit about the feedback as well, right? And being open to that. And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but really want to get your opinions on the open, honest feedback, not only but the receiver, but the giver as well. And how are some of the things that how do you go about receiving, maybe less than positive feedback at times, both from your leadership and maybe from your subordinates as well?
I guess the first question I always ask is, how can I do better? Um, and like get some details about what I did wrong, but how can I do better? And then, what is your experience in a similar situation that can, potentially get some nuggets of information from. Um, because I mean, like I said, I don't want to make the same mistakes twice, and you don't get to be in key leadership roles if you keep on making the same mistake. So you got to listen, and then you got to not do the same thing again.
And so with that in mind, you know, we talk about just feedback overall. Is there an approach for somebody who may be a little bit more junior that may not have that confidence that say, give me that direct feedback, right? I want to hear the really the good and the bad, right? Is there some nugget that we can provide to them that might give them a little bit more confidence in how to request feedback, even if it's not the most glowing kind of feedback?
Yeah, it's the fear thing, right? Some people look at a title and they think, man, I can't talk to Neville. He's a director. I just can't do it. And I'm a known person like everybody else. I go into work and I'm probably the most casually dressed director at the company, and I do that one for I need to feel comfortable, and also for other people to feel comfortable with talking to me. And I also try to set up an environment where people feel comfortable to have those conversations. And then when people are open to feeling comfortable to have those conversations, we can have very frank conversations. And I've had that with the people that I mentor and the people in my department. And when you're genuine like that, that you usually don't get a backlash from the people. The backlash usually occurs if you're not genuine and you don't put in the groundwork up front, get to know your people, get to know about their lives. If you don't put that groundwork up front, then they're a little bit more skeptical. But if you do it up front, uh, people will tell you everything, and they'll be much more open and receptive to feedback.
And coming from you again, like I said, I think we've known each other for somewhere between, I'll say, 5 to 8 years or something like that. It feels like that. It feels longer than that. But I personally, when we first met, it was kind of like, okay, I feel like I've known this brother forever, right? And so I can only imagine that is the same kind of atmosphere that you cultivate with your employees as well. And so for some, it may not be as easy talking to their leader because maybe they're not as approachable. But is there things that maybe for them, and I know kind of touching on the point again a little bit, but is there something that they can do? Is there kind of maybe they should shift to talking to a mentor or somebody else that may be able to help create an environment with their current leader that can be a little bit more open. I'm not sure if there's ways to make that a better environment.
Yeah, I always try to keep it simple. Hey, just go up to them, introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Neville. I work as a director for electronics and payloads. Hey, can we get a few minutes on your calendar to talk? And I tell you, any good leader within the organization will say, yeah, feel free. They'll probably go over to tell you to go to talk to their admin assistant and get it on the calendar. But most leaders will do that. You just have to open your mouth and ask. So it could be very very simple. You don't have to overcomplicate it. You don't have to do like a capture plan type situation. Just hey, go up to the person. Hey, let me get a few minutes on your calendar. I mean, I I always say yes. I mean, and because of that, I mean, I've had executives that I've met like, from a time in Chicago and from other sites that I visit. They'll send people over my way to talk to me. I'm like, wow, okay. Didn't think you thought that highly of me to do this, but hey, if you want me to talk to him, I'll talk to him. And then we have the easy conversation, and I try to teach them what I talked about here. Hey, just have the confidence to go up and talk to somebody. It's not that difficult.
And I got to give a shout out to my boss's boss, right? He's probably not on. I don't know if my boss is on or not. So I came off a very difficult program, trying to help that out. And so I wanted to set some expectations with him, right? And, my current boss, I've known her, we've known each other for many, many years. So we kind of had that established. So I wanted to reach out to my boss's boss, right? And so I said, hey, I put a meeting notice on his calendar and I'm like, okay, I just want to, talk and set some expectations that you may have for me and the like. And so I put the meeting on the calendar and maybe about 10 minutes before the meeting, he sends me an IM, and I'm like, I'm trying to find where your office is right now. I'll be down to your office in a minute. He's like, no, I'm on my way to you. I was like, wait a second, what do you mean? He's like, I'm on my way to your office now. And just that moment where it wasn't, and I remember a long time ago when I was working at Northtel Networks, and I'm dating myself, in terms of how long that's been. When my manager then said to me, manage by walking around, right? And I know there's that whole construct. The fact that he walked over to me and made the point to come to my office and sit down in one of my chairs and talk to me, it made such a huge difference, right? Because again, you're trying to establish that I'm trying to be forward and have that open conversation, but that gesture of him coming to me as opposed to, okay, Justin, come to my office. I thought that was an amazing gesture on his part. So yeah, having somebody who is easy to have that discussion with. I want to say easy, but they're open to that. But then I think to your point of not just that person, but you have your tribe of individuals that can provide that feedback, and maybe they can see something from a distance that maybe if you don't get that direct feedback from your manager, you can have from somebody who's distance, that 360 kind of assessment, if you would. So, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I was gonna say, so there's a situation where I have like some of my younger engineers in my department, and we have a conversation. They are the ones who are a little bit more open. They're not afraid to have the conversation, and then I use them as the conduit, to talk to people like, hey, if there are other people who have issues, and they're afraid to speak up, you go to that person and say, hey, Neville's the good guy to talk to. You need to get this off your chest. Um, Go set up the conversation. They may actually reach out to me and set up the conversation. So there's many different ways, but I rather have people come to me to have the conversation than keep stuff bottled up and then you know deal with like mental health issues, affects their work performance. We don't need that. I mean, in the end, at least in on the defense side, we're just trying to make sure our brothers and sisters in the armed forces come home. I don't need people here, trying to make that happen, stroking out, dying at their desk, feeling, like they don't have an outlet to reach out to somebody. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Right. And we're always talking about kind of that psychology of that. There's another question that came up, and it was,
Mhm.
the question about the role of psychology, and managing personalities and how that plays into your role. The question is, can you, share one or two tips that you found helpful, maybe trying to understand the psychology of the individuals? There's something you can say, yeah, it was these kind of things that was important for me to help learn those individuals.
Hmm. Um, I remember when I started my MBA program, there was a couple of classes that I really enjoyed, and they were classified as business classes, but they were more psychology classes. And those classes, they talked a lot about like the motivation of people and trying to identify what that is, and then you know giving the person what they need. And that was probably the most enjoyable class because it clicked a lot of things in my head. Like when I was an engineer before, moving into management and seeing how engineers act and seeing the responses, I'm like, oh, this is the piece of psychology that was going on there. And then realizing, okay, if I was in that situation, a similar situation, how would I handle that differently? So I guess a lot of it was, reading about, psychology of people, leadership characteristics, um, and then, I mean, actually, spending a lot of time with leaders and observing them and seeing what worked and what didn't work. And the stuff that didn't work, you log that in your brain and like, okay, when I see the situation happening, I need to pivot and go a different direction. And then the stuff that I see that works, and I tried it myself and I see that it works, that's the stuff I put into my toolkit to use every day. So I mean, a lot of it is, you got that book learning, but then it's also putting it into application and seeing, how it works for you.
And I think that's excellent because I always it's not always about treating everybody exactly the same, right?
Mhm.
It's understanding the motivation for why people do their job, right? For me, I tell all the time, my little girl who just turned 13, days ago, there's an extreme motivation, and she wants to be an engineer into her own self. So there's the motivation of making sure that my little girl can go to college and while there's always my own personal motivation of growing and being better, but having that motivation of her, I tell this one quick story. When she was about to be born, I was near finishing up my master's degree, and I said I got to finish this up before she gets here. I was like, so that was the extreme of motivation because I was like, it ain't gonna happen when she gets here. So that was quite the kick in the pants to finish up my master's degree at the time. So. So we have about 15 minutes or so left. I see we have roughly about 13 people on the session here. I'm going to take a quick pause. I know we've gotten a good couple of handful of questions here. Invite people to ask additional questions, whether if you're on the YouTube, if you're on the LinkedIn, if you're coming in from Facebook, you're welcome to ask questions at this point in time. I know we did that the entire way through, but if there was something that you were saving, feel free to type that in the chat now, and I'll bring that up. In the meantime, while we're doing that, Neville, is there some, you know, I don't want to say wrap up comments, but is there some points that you would tell the audience in terms of that career progression, that career development? You need to think about a couple of things here that's really going to be helpful to you.
Um, I guess the first thing would be don't be afraid to fail. Failure will happen at some point. You just gotta overcome that. And the second thing is networking. If I think the term I use, like, networking is just as important as performance, because once you get to a certain level, for you to get to that next level, someone has to, co-sign on that, right? So in my case, a VP has to have enough trust in me to, put their career on the line to have me be in that position, right? So, I mean, I could be, the top performer on the program all the time, but if that one person doesn't believe and, wants me in their organization, I'm never going to reach that next level. So that's where the networking piece comes in, the relationship piece comes in. A lot of people don't focus enough on that, and that could be the piece that takes you from, you know aspiring, manager, through like to director, VP, president. It's that little thing.
Gotcha. We've had a couple of questions that come in, some from names that I'm very familiar with. So I'm just going to start firing away. We're going to wrap up right around at the 7:30 time. But in the meantime, and I don't know if this first question was for you or for me, but the question was, you mentioned always say yes, but is it okay to say no if you don't know the task or you know that the task is not for you? Or the role is not for you? Is it okay to say no at any point in time?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
I say, yeah, it's okay to say no. I'd say just make sure you communicate your reason why. It may be that you might not understand the position fully, so that might be the delta between you saying no and saying yes. And let's say you're in a different point in your life, like you're starting a family, so you don't want to, you know, uproot yourself to go off for another opportunity. Say so, but say, hey, I can't do it today, but let's say 2, 3 years from now, when things are a little bit more stable, if there's a similar opportunity that comes up, hit me up, and I'll be ready. So saying no is okay.
Okay. The next question comes from one of our YouTubers, and again, another person I'm familiar with. What are the main things that you would try to accomplish within the first 90 days of taking over an organization?
Wow, I feel like I'm on a job interview right now.
I won't get
uh,
the first few ads that I'm going to email or IM them tomorrow. I'm like, you put my boy on blast.
the first 90 days is the first thing is just to get to know your direct reports and as many people in the organization as you can. Again, from the psychology point, know what motivates them, um, understand their career, where they would like to go in the future, and then take all that information and back and develop a strategy of how you want to handle that going forward. And then another thing would be just to understand where the good, the bad, and the ugly are in your organization. So you can again understand how you want to handle that and tie the people that you have in your organization to help you achieve those goals.
Okay. And like I said, I am him first thing. If I got my work computer to my right, I might be the person might be getting an IM from me in a little bit. The next question: how do you? And this one I think is a good one. I didn't know. I didn't think about this myself. How do you know when it's time to change your role?
I'd say, from what I heard from most people, and I say this is true, is when you feel way too comfortable in your role and you're not growing anymore, it's time to explore something new. And it may not be getting a brand new position, it may be taking on an additional task outside of what you normally do and succeeding at that task. Um, but I'd say, hey, have those discussions uh, with your boss, and they may be able, if especially if you're performing well, they may be able to facilitate those moves for you, or tell you who to go talk to about making those moves.
I remember on one of my jobs, it was, well, you've gotten it to a good place. It's no longer in trouble. It's time for your next job, right? I was like, well, I'm not finished yet. I want to, no, it's time for your next job. I just, I was like, I wanted, it was so close. I just wanted to see if it over the finish line. That's not how this works. The next question, if you weren't an engineer, what would you be?
Oh, geez.
A professor?
Well, I
A
mean,
baseball coach? Baseball coach.
I wanted to play for the Yankees when I was a kid, or coach the Yankees. That probably been ideal. Um, Yeah, probably being a professor. I mean, that was kind of where I wanted to go originally. So I say that.
Okay. Yeah, this is the first time I've had these many questions pop up, so we just gonna roll with it. We got about
Okay.
another 8 minutes. We're gonna roll with it. The next one that I have is let's see how we can do this. Can you talk about a good way to ask how the process of execution, what you should ask your mentor on, right? So how should I talk to my mentor about executing without them believing that I'm just relying on them telling me how to go do the job?
Oh man, that's an interesting one. Um, I always challenge my folks to tell me how they would handle a situation before I give my opinion on how to handle a situation,
Hmm,
and
gotcha.
I challenge their thought process. I'm more worried about the process than the end result, because how I handle things may not be the right way for them to handle things. Again, I was brought up different culture, different environment, different branding, I guess you could say. So if I try the same technique as someone else, that may not work. That might not be the right answer. So I dig more into the process and how they normally handle situations, and then try to give them advice based off of that, than trying to tell them how I would handle it, because that may be incorrect.
No, I got you. So, and I think that's really what it was is, help me understand what maybe the process is to think about the answer, how I want to get there, as opposed to what's the exact steps to get there, right? And I think about my daughter in her school now, some of the methods that they're teaching them now, vastly different than what I learned growing up. And I'm kind of like, I've never seen that before, but yeah, I think the process of helping people kind of engineer it as opposed to just telling them the steps, I think that's the important part. We have one last question. Like I said, I'm thankful everybody's asked so many good questions. This is the first time we had these many questions back to back, but I'm thankful for it. How do you prevent communication breakdown among team members? And I want to hear this one because I had that a little bit earlier today. So I'm glad it wasn't the person who was on that meeting. So how do you prevent communication breakdown among team members?
Um, Trust but verify. Um, I mean, there's a lot of times, and I'm not saying, at least in my organization, everything gets flowed down as they should. But I do my walk arounds and I talk with some of the individual contributors. Hey, I asked them, hey, did this type of information make it down to your level? And if they tell me no, then hey, I'm going to go to their manager and ask, hey, what happened that this person doesn't know that particular piece of information. So it's not like a real time thing, but it kind of gives you, when you see it coming from multiple people, it may change the strategy on how you communicate. It may be a situation where, hey, in some situations, I want to go directly to all my employees, and then in some situations, I may want to, go through my managers to deliver that information.
No, I understand you're having a strategy, right? In that communication, right? So it's not just, and I'll be candid, there's times where I will try to deliver the message. Sometimes I will ask somebody else to do it just because the way that the message may come, and I know their strengths, the communication may be a lot easier. And just overall, to try to avoid as much email as possible, right? Because sometimes that just can muddy the water in the message.
Yeah, for me to be successful, I have to trust my managers, my leaders. So it's a situation where, hey, you have to build your brand. Hey, you may have to deliver this piece of information versus me.
Right. And so I think that's it. That's all the questions we have. I was very excited to see as many questions that popped up. Neville, is there any parting thoughts that you wanted to kind of leave the audience with?
I you know went from a little kid growing up in New York City to NSBE Distinguished Engineer of the Year. I mean, I say even in college when I was reading NSBE magazine, I mean, honestly, I never thought that I would be one of those people that other people are talking about. So, um, you know, don't give up on your dreams. You could just as well be sitting in the same chair that I am now and being interviewed by, the great Justin Cloud. So,
Oh, yeah, okay. Don't even try to put that on me.
yes, yes, sir.
So, so everybody, we really appreciate your time tonight. I did drop the link in the chat for people to be able to donate. Also, I wanted to make sure I dropped in there the article on Neville, so that way people can take a look at that as well. So Neville, thank you again for tonight. You've been nothing but a great supporter to the foundation. Thank you again, and everybody. Thank you for your participation and you joining us on the CFF Live, hosted by the Cloud Family Foundation. Have a great evening, everyone.